So, have you ever asked an AI a really complicated real-world question, and the answer you got was, well, technically perfect, but somehow totally tone-deaf to the actual human reality of the situation? I mean, we all know artificial intelligence is absolutely incredible at crunching numbers, or summarizing massive documents, or writing pristine code. But what happens when you ask it a question that requires actual moral context? How can we trust these systems to make complex, value-laden judgments about our world when, let's be honest, they don't actually live in it? Well, welcome to today's Explainer. We are diving into a groundbreaking new AI benchmark called the Shakeela Begum Protocol. This research was tested literally just today, May 31st, 2026, and it fundamentally challenges how we think about artificial reasoning. It might actually be the key to teaching AI how to see the human beings behind the data points.
Okay, let's look at the roadmap for today. We'll start with the ultimate stress test where standard reasoning totally failed, introduce the Shakeela Begum Protocol, go over the head-to-head results, uncover what standard reasoning missed, and finally talk about balancing engines versus auditors. Let's jump in.
All right, part one, the ultimate stress test. We really need to look at what happens when we push AI way beyond basic facts and into the messy reality of human problems. To fully grasp this new breakthrough, we first need to understand the standard it's challenging. Right now, the industry standard for complex AI problem solving is a framework called Chain of Thought, or CoT for short. Think of this as the reasoning engine humming under the hood of your favorite chatbots. It forces the AI to break a problem down and solve it step by step, showing its logical work along the way. And look, for technical tasks, this is phenomenal. If you need to debug 1,000 lines of Python or solve some brutal physics equation, Chain of Thought finds the fastest, most logical path from A to B. But researchers wanted to know something absolutely crucial. Does this cold, step-by-step logic actually hold up when the problem isn't just a factual puzzle, but an inherently human, political, and moral dilemma?
That brings us to the exact query used to stress test the system. Independent researcher Yasirfarooq, based out of Karachi, fed a highly charged socio-political question into Claude Sonnet 4.6. The prompt was simple, but heavy. Is the rate of inflation in Pakistan justifiable? Now, this specific query was chosen very deliberately because it's what we call distributionally complex. In plain English, that just means the correct answer changes dramatically depending on who you are. An inflation rate might look like a totally necessary market correction to a billionaire protected by foreign assets, right? But it looks like absolute devastation to a street vendor who suddenly can't afford cooking oil. The question actively forces the AI to juggle economics, state policy, human welfare, all at the exact same time.
So, when Standard Chain of Thought got this prompt, something fascinating happened. The AI simply swallowed the question's premise whole, without any pushback whatsoever. It just accepted the word justifiable as if it were a neutral technical term, kind of like asking if a bridge's weight limit is justifiable based on the steel they used. Instead of recognizing the immense moral weight hidden inside the prompt, Chain of Thought just acted like a cold calculator. It pulled up high-level macroeconomic data and tried to balance an equation, totally missing the human context that justifiable is a deeply subjective concept. Which brings us to Section 2, the Shakeela Begum Protocol, a completely new challenger emerges.
Enter the Shakeela Begum Protocol, or SBP. Rather than just taking a prompt at face value and spitting out a quick answer, SBP introduces a three-stage metal-air process before the actual reasoning even begins. Let's unpack this, because this is where the magic really happens. Step 1 is negation. The AI is literally forced to hit the brakes and actively reject the hidden assumptions in the prompt, like rejecting the idea that inflation can simply be justified by math. Step 2 is interrogation. Here the AI asks, wait, who benefits and who suffers from looking at it this way? It interrogates the power dynamics. And finally, step 3 is affirmation. The AI restates the problem, but this time the human context is fully baked in. It dynamically reframes the whole approach, forcing the system to pause and evaluate the nature of the question before it even tries to solve it.
This brilliantly captures the core philosophy of the whole study. The researcher stated, SBP is not prompt chaining. It is pre-reasoning epistemic hygiene. That phrase, epistemic hygiene, is just incredibly powerful. Think about a surgeon, right? Before a surgeon ever picks up a scalpel, what do? They wash their hands. They scrub in. They create a sterile environment. That is exactly what SBP is doing for artificial intelligence. These three stages don't just add clunky extra steps. They fundamentally wash the logical workspace. They clean out the hidden biases before the AI goes to work on the actual problem.
So how does this theory hold up in reality? Let's check out part 3,
the head-to-head benchmark showdown. When the researcher tested 3 different conditions, the numbers were just completely unambiguous. When standard chain of thought was used all by itself, relying purely on its own baseline logic, it scored an overall 6.6 out of 10. I mean, passing, but pretty mediocre. But when the Shakeela Begum protocol was introduced, game changer. When SBP was used upstream, meaning it filtered and cleaned the question first before handing it over to the standard engine, the score leaped to 9.1. And when they reversed it, having the standard engine answer first, but using SBP downstream to audit the final conclusion, the score hit a massive 9.4. That is an undeniable, dramatic leap in performance, literally, just from adding a layer of critical reflection. But the most stunning plot point in this dataset is what happened with bias detection. Standard chain of thought scored an abysmal 4.0 in detecting bias. It was practically blind to it, and frankly, that should terrify us. We're moving so fast toward a world where AI will approve loans, dictate public policy, and manage healthcare. If the baseline engine is blind to bias, real people are going to get hurt. But applying SBP upstream jumped that bias detection score to an incredible 9.5. Applying it downstream practically perfected it at a 9.8. This shows how SBP successfully injects profound contextual awareness into a system that otherwise just wants to do cold, hard math.
Moving on to Section 4. The distributional reality. Let's dig into exactly what caused standard reasoning to miss the mark so badly.
This comparison really tells the whole story, and we should sit with these differences for a second. When asked if the inflation was justifiable, standard CoT claimed it was partially justifiable based on economic indicators. It literally concluded that the medicine worked and blamed the hardship on external shocks. But the SBP audit found these conclusions totally hollow. When CoT claimed the medicine worked, SBP fired back, pointing out, yeah, maybe for high-level state indicators, but real wages for everyday people never recovered. When CoT blamed external shocks, SBP noted that, while true, it entirely ignores the chosen policy failures of those in power. Standard reasoning implicitly favored the institutional narrative, completely silent on how the elite were insulated from the crisis.
And the crucial emotional turn of this whole experiment really boils down to this. SBP's negation stage immediately identified the core flaw in the prompt by asking one simple, profound question, justifiable to whom? Think about how often you read a headline or a corporate memo that treats human beings as nothing more than abstract data points. That's exactly what standard chain of thought did. To the standard engine, the 40% of Pakistanis living near or below the poverty line were just variables in a formula. But SBP forced the system to treat them as actual human agents. It demanded that the AI recognize that an economy is made of people, not just numbers.
So, what's our ultimate takeaway here? Let's wrap up with Section 5, Engines versus Auditors, and how we actually build a better AI. We need to start thinking of the future of AI not as a single all-knowing brain, but as a machine with distinct specialized parts. Chain of thought is your reasoning engine. The Shakeela Begum protocol is your reasoning auditor. These are absolutely not competitors. You shouldn't feel like you have to pick one or the other. They are complementary gears in a much more capable cognitive machine. You need the engine to drive the logic forward and crunch massive amounts of data, for sure. But you absolutely need the auditor, holding the steering wheel, making sure that logic is navigating the real, messy human world responsible. This is what makes this research so actionable, depending entirely on what you're trying to do. Let's say you're working in local government, using AI to draft real-world policy. You want sequence 1. You run SBP as an upstream filter to clean the question first, setting strict moral guardrails before the engine even fires up to draft the policy. Empathy is baked in from step 1. But let's say your goal is research or diagnostics or maybe teaching a class on critical thinking. Then you want sequence 2. You let the standard engine run its course, let it make its mistakes, and then you use SBP as a downstream auditor to map out exactly where the logic failed, where it showed bias, and who it ignored.
Now, to maintain our own epistemic hygiene, we have to be totally impartial and look at the honest limitations of the source material. This was session-based scoring tested just today, May 31st, 2026. That means it hasn't gone through the slow, rigorous process of formal peer review yet. It also focused heavily on a single socio-political domain. And the researcher rightly notes that for purely technical queries, like mapping a physics simulation, standard chain of thought would easily outscore SBP because there's no moral framing required. Finally, it's worth noting that SBP's findings on things like real wages were argued structurally by the AI's internal logic rather than pulling from a live statistical database.
But even with those limitations, you have to admit this framework opens up a vitally urgent conversation. We are rapidly handing over complex, high-stakes, real-world problems to artificial reasoning engines. If standard logic inherently favors the powerful while reducing the vulnerable to mere data points on a spreadsheet, well, we have a massive societal problem on our hands. The Shakeela-Begum protocol offers a brilliant structural solution to literally force these systems to care about context. But it does leave us with one final, deeply provocative question to ponder as we move into this new era. As AI increasingly judges our socio-political reality, who is auditing the auditor? Take a moment to really think about that one. Thank you so much for joining us for this explainer, and keep asking the hard questions.